Sound of typewriter, black and white footage of Berlin and Washington. Narrator, dramatic tone. December 11th, 1941, the day Adolf Hitler made one of the most fatal decisions of World War II. Only 4 days after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Nazi Germany declared war on the United States. It was a moment that would forever change the course of history, sealing the fate of the Third Reich and shaping the destiny of the modern world. But why did Hitler declare war on America, a country that had not yet declared war on Germany? Was it arrogance? Was it loyalty to Japan? Or was it simply madness, the final step in Hitler's path toward self-destruction? This is the untold story of how one man's decision united the greatest industrial power on earth against him and began the end of Nazi Germany, the world before December 11th. In early December 1941, Adolf Hitler stood at the height of his power. His armies controlled most of Europe. From the snowy fields of Russia to the deserts of North Africa, the Nazi war machine seemed unstoppable. France had fallen. Britain stood alone, barely surviving under constant German bombardment. And the Soviet Union was bleeding heavily under Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's massive invasion of Russia, launched in June 1941. Yet, there was one country that could tip the balance, the United States of America. For 2 long years, America had stayed officially neutral. President Franklin D. Roosevelt wanted to help Britain and other allied nations, but he faced strong opposition at home. Most Americans remembered the horrors of World War I. They didn't want to fight another European war. Still, Roosevelt found ways to support Britain through programs like Lend-Lease, sending food, weapons, and supplies across the Atlantic. But Hitler knew, deep down, that America was slowly becoming the arsenal of democracy. And in the back of his mind, he feared one thing. If America joined the war, Germany's chances of victory would vanish. The Japanese gamble. On the other side of the world, Japan had its own ambitions. The empire of the rising sun sought dominance over Asia and the Pacific, but America stood in its way, imposing oil embargoes and economic sanctions to stop Japanese expansion. In Tokyo, the military decided to strike first. They planned a surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese unleashed hell. Hundreds of planes roared through the sky, bombing American ships and airfields. In less than 2 hours, more than 2,400 Americans were dead, and much of the Pacific Fleet lay in ruins. America was shocked, but united. On December 8th, President Roosevelt delivered his famous speech. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States declared war on Japan, but not on Germany. At that moment, America was at war only in the Pacific. Hitler could have stayed out of it. He could have watched America bleed in Asia, while Germany focused on defeating the Soviet Union. But instead, he chose war, Hitler's fatal decision. Inside the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, Hitler received the news of Japan's success with joy. He believed Japan's attack would finally distract the United States and keep them out of Europe. But within days, his thinking shifted. Hitler was furious that Roosevelt had already been helping Britain with weapons and supplies. He believed that America's neutrality was a lie, that the U.S. was already at war with Germany, just not officially. In his speeches, Hitler often mocked Roosevelt as a puppet of Jewish and capitalist interests. To him, the declaration of war was simply a matter of time. And when Japan struck, Hitler saw it as destiny, a chance to strike before being struck. On December 11, 1941, standing before the Reichstag, Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States of America, the speech that changed history. The hall echoed with applause from Nazi officials and party members, but behind the cheers there was confusion. Hitler began his speech with calm confidence. Since Roosevelt's entry into office, he has systematically pursued a policy of war against Germany. He accused the U.S. of aggression in the Atlantic, of aiding Britain and sabotaging peace. He claimed that Germany's patience had reached its limit. Then, with dramatic force, Hitler announced, "The German Reich, therefore, considers itself at war with the United States of America." The room erupted in applause. But outside Berlin, the world changed in an instant. Roosevelt's response. In Washington, D.C., the news hit the White House like a thunderbolt. Franklin Roosevelt and his advisors had been expecting this, but not so soon. On December 11th, Germany and Italy both declared war on America. Just hours later, the United States declared war in return. Now America was officially fighting a global war against both the Axis powers in Europe and Japan in Asia. Roosevelt wasted no time. Factories that once made cars began producing tanks and planes. Young men lined up at recruitment centers, and across the country, the American spirit ignited like never before. Hitler's miscalculation. Hitler believed the United States was weak, a mongrel nation, as he called it, unprepared for war and divided by politics. He assumed that by the time America mobilized, Germany would already have crushed the Soviet Union and forced Britain to surrender, but he underestimated the power of American industry and unity. Within a year, the U.S. was producing more weapons, ships, and aircraft than all Axis powers combined. The sleeping giant, as Japanese Admiral Yamamoto described it, had truly awakened. By declaring war on America, Hitler had united his enemies into a single unstoppable coalition. The turning point of the war. From 1942 onward, the tide began to turn. American convoys kept Britain alive. U.S. troops landed in North Africa, then Italy, and finally in France on D-Day, June 6, 1944. The same factories that made cars and refrigerators were now building B-17 bombers and Sherman tanks. German cities faced relentless Allied bombing. Hitler's armies were pushed back on all fronts, east by the Soviets, west by the Americans and British. The Third Reich, once destined for 1,000 years, began to crumble, and it all traced back to one moment of arrogance in December 1941. What if Hitler had not declared war? Historians have long debated this question. What if Hitler had stayed quiet after Pearl Harbor? What if Germany had let America fight only Japan? Some believe Roosevelt would still have found a way to bring the U.S. into the European war. Others argue that without a formal German declaration, Congress would have hesitated. But one thing is certain. Hitler's decision made it easy for Roosevelt to unite the nation. No longer was America fighting only for revenge. Now it was fighting for freedom, against tyranny on all fronts. Inside Hitler's mind. So why did Hitler do it? Some historians think it was a matter of honor. Loyalty to Japan under the Tripartite Pact. Others see it as pure delusion. Hitler believing that Japan would now attack Russia from the east, relieving pressure on Germany. But Japan never attacked the Soviet Union. Instead, it focused on the Pacific, leaving Hitler alone to face the Red Army. In the end, it was a fatal mix of arrogance, hatred, and misjudgment. Hitler underestimated America's resolve, overestimated Japan's help, and sealed his own doom. The consequences. By 1945, Berlin lay in ruins. The United States had become the world's strongest military and industrial power. The war that Hitler wanted had destroyed everything he built. Germany was divided, Europe was scarred, and Hitler himself was dead, by his own hand. In a bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, the world entered a new era, one dominated not by Nazi Germany, but by the United States and the Soviet Union. America awakens. Sound of factory sirens, engines roaring, and newspapers printing war. Narrator. The moment Germany declared war, the sleeping giant fully awakened. American factories lit up day and night, the great industrial heart of the nation beating faster than ever before. Men left their homes to enlist. Women stepped into factories, welding steel, assembling planes, and building ships. In a matter of months, the United States became the most powerful war machine the world had ever seen. President Roosevelt called it the arsenal of democracy. Detroit, Chicago, and Pittsburgh became the new battlefields, forging weapons that would soon cross the Atlantic to strike Hitler's empire. And as the first American convoys sailed for Britain, one message echoed across the ocean. Germany started this war, but America will finish it. The world turns against Hitler. By 1942, Hitler realized his terrible mistake. Instead of fighting divided enemies, he now faced a united world. The United States joined hands with Britain and the Soviet Union, creating the Grand Alliance. Three nations with different ideologies, yet one goal: the destruction of Nazi Germany. American troops began arriving in Europe. Fresh, motivated, and well-equipped, they brought hope to the Allied cause. Meanwhile, U.S. bombers took to the skies, pounding German industry day and night. The war Hitler thought he could win was now slipping from his grasp. In Stalingrad, his army was being destroyed. In North Africa, his forces were retreating. And over the Atlantic, American destroyers hunted German U-boats relentlessly. The declaration of war, once hailed in Berlin as a bold strike, had become a curse. Germany's enemies had multiplied and its strength was bleeding away. The inevitable fall. By 1944, the American war machine reached full power. The Allies launched D-Day, the greatest invasion in history. Over 150,000 soldiers, many of them American, stormed the beaches of Normandy. As the Reich collapsed, Hitler watched from his bunker, delusional, isolated, refusing to accept reality. He blamed everyone but himself, his generals, the weather, even fate. But deep down, one truth was undeniable. It all began on December 11, 1941, when he declared war on the United States. From that day forward, Germany's defeat was only a matter of time. The man who once dreamed of conquering the world had unleashed its wrath upon himself, the echo of his own words. The German Reich considers itself at war with the United States of America, became the sound of his empire's destruction narrator, somber, emotional. History has many turning points, but few as decisive as this. On December 11, 1941, Adolf Hitler didn't just declare war on America. He declared war on the future. He united the world's greatest powers against him. He turned potential neutrality into total opposition. And in doing so, he sealed his own fate. The lesson of that day remains clear even today. Arrogance can build empires, but wisdom keeps them standing.